But to add to the harm, by continuing this lie about my character that I am a pastor seductress of some kind, I didn't need that. I didn't need someone new to come on the scene and tell more lies about me.
Welcome to Perverted Justice. This is not just a story. It's a call to action for integrity and radical honesty, in spite of personal cost. Now here's your host, Sheila Clark.
Welcome back to Perverted Justice. This is episode 3. In episode 2, we went over some conversations that were had in the fall of 2019, and I discussed kind of at length the disappearance of documents. Well, on December 5 of 2019, I requested and received from Mike Green an affidavit written and signed by Floyd Gonzalez in July of 2005. Along with it, I received a series of emails that substantiated things that were said in the affidavit. And I don't want to get too far into the details of everything that's contained here at this point. But what's important for you to know is that I did receive it on the 5th of December, and that it shows that within 4 days of Weaver being exposed, the 2005 pastors of Hyde Park Baptist Church were alerted to a pattern in Weaver's behavior that indicated an attraction to and a pursuit of teenage girls. I'm going to read you just a couple little excerpts from one of the emails that was sent directly to Pastor Buccio on April 28. And Pastor Buccio, for those who don't know, was the second in command at Hyde Park until Weaver was terminated. And I'm not sure if he was voted into the senior pastor role yet as of April 28 or not, but he was voted into that position very shortly after Weaver left. This letter is from Floyd and Nancy Gonzalez to Pastor Buccio, dated Thursday, April 28, 2005. In our opinion, it is very important that the facts of the earlier incident be known at this time because it shows that Jonathan has established a pattern for this kind of behavior. My main concern is that if I did not relay the facts I knew to the seminary, Jonathan might very well start another church somewhere and be faced with this sin again. If sometime in the future some young girl becomes pregnant in this way and I have not done everything I can to prevent it, then I share in the blame. With respect to Sheila, Nancy has on at least 3 occasions confronted Jonathan about being alone with her in a closed room. On one occasion, Nancy was so mad she was shaking and reminded Jonathan over and over that he had promised he would not do this again. It is my understanding that others, both church members and other staff members, have told Jonathan that such behavior is improper. It is my view that Sheila is a victim because Jonathan has been grooming her for this since she was 14 or 15. I haven't told anyone yet at this point that this started when I was 15, and yet Floyd and Nancy Gonzalez already know it. In the affidavit, Floyd states, "I then gave Weaver a list of things I thought he should do to avoid this type of situation and its appearance in the future. In this list was the request that he never be in a closed room with a young woman again. This list was a written list that Weaver had to sign. That list has never surfaced. It never showed up in the discovery process. Floyd Gonzalez never turned it over with his affidavit. But by his own admission, he thought the earlier incident was serious enough that he had him sign a document to govern his behavior, and then also by his own admission, he and his wife were aware of multiple instances of him breaking one of the rules, at least, and they did nothing about it. It was shocking to me because of the way that I was still treated, even though they had this knowledge available to them. It was shocking to me that I was still blamed instead of defended, that I was still interrogated instead of having someone explain to me what happened to me. That's as deep as I'm going to get into the contents of this affidavit at this time, but I did receive it in early December of 2019. Then I went out for the funeral that we already discussed in episode 1. Hopefully you've listened to the other 2 episodes, but I need to add here too that this is the only time that I had interaction with Richard Murray this entire process. It has recently come to my attention that he is claiming that he had a meeting with me 2 weeks before he was served with the lawsuit, in which I apparently claimed that I would never sue the church and wore inappropriate clothing, leaned over his desk, and I tried to get him to look down my shirt. And I can't tell you how unbelievably evil telling that kind of lie is. It's one thing for him to refuse to step into this and do the right thing and help bring peace and redemption and healing and all of that. That's one thing. But to add to the harm by continuing this lie about my character that I am a pastor seductress of some kind, I didn't need that. I didn't need someone new to come on the scene and tell more lies about me. I never had any such meeting. And if he told you that I did, he lied to you. In order for me to have had a meeting with him 2 weeks before the lawsuit was served on them would have put me in New York State at the end of June or the beginning of July of 2020. I did not travel during the pandemic. I guess when you know that you're doing the wrong thing, especially when you're supposed to be like the embodiment of morality and righteousness, and you can't live up to that, then you have to lie about it. But whatever versions of that story you heard, they're all lies, and I will die on that hill. Anyway, also at this funeral, Donna Blue sat and talked to me for a little while, and she honestly seemed the most genuine. She asked me questions about my kids, and she asked me how I was doing, and I tried hard to get through to her. She seemed like she was at least semi-receptive, and I really wanted them to understand that I wasn't trying to attack them or hurt them. I wanted them to understand that I needed the truth. Donna asked me to stop talking a few times, like don't tell me that, or don't tell me too much, or just kind of trying to limit the information that was coming her direction, which was frustrating to me because I knew what I was and wasn't allowed to say, but I didn't really care a whole lot about what was allowed, because if we could have done this without a lawsuit, I would have been happy to do that. And so for her to be like kind of holding back, restricting communication was frustrating. It was frustrating because I really needed them to get it right. I was practically trying to spoon feed them their response because I was so desperate for them to prove to me that a church could do the right thing when it was the hard thing. Anyway, that whole experience was just super disappointing. It was like having the door slammed in my face and a note slid underneath that said, "We love you and we're praying for you." So the day after the funeral, I went to Resurrection Bible Church where Jim Mitchell was the pastor. And this is the first time that I'm seeing any of them in person since I left the negative review on their Facebook page. Jim Mitchell approached me after the service and he shook my hand and met my children and what have you, but he didn't take the opportunity to apologize to me at all for the comments that he made in the hotel lobby. And I was kind of looking at this visit to the church as kind of like an opportunity to sort of redeem myself because I was very abrupt and kind of nasty the last time that I saw him in response to the things that he said to me. And I don't know what I was expecting. I don't think that I was expecting an apology, but he definitely didn't offer me one. And I know that I had said to Mike Green that, I can forgive Jim Mitchell for what he said, but I can't go so far as to believe that he didn't mean what he said when he said it. So anyways, I went back home, and on the 20th, I think, or maybe the 22nd of December, I actually went to a local church here where Jonathan Weaver's oldest son was functioning in some pastoral role. He read the opening scripture for the service and then kind of disappeared out the back of the sanctuary. And when I tried to follow him, he was just gone. He vanished. So I asked one of the ushers to find him for me, and I sat and waited. And when he came around the corner, he saw me and recognized me immediately. And he had this flash of like terror across his face. And he walked past me in order to get behind a stairwell, I guess to regain his composure. And then he came out looking all confident again. Anyway, I asked him if he knew who I was, which I knew he did just by his reaction. He said that he did. And I asked him to tell me what he knew about me so that we could begin the conversation on the same foot, because the last time I saw him was in 2005, and he was 13 or 14 at the time, I think. So he said that I knew his dad. I said, I think you know a little more than that. And so then he said, you guys had a relationship, you wound up being pregnant. That's why he resigned, stepped down, and removed. He said that was all he knew, and he'd never asked for more details, and that from his perspective, it really didn't matter. I told him that it definitely does matter, that he and his siblings deserve to hear the truth before it's in the newspaper, because I went not ever thinking that his father was going to be arrested. I really didn't think that that was ever going to happen. So if the lawsuit hit first, that would end up in the newspaper before he ever knew about it. I wanted to give them time to process privately before they found out with the rest of the world. Though I really didn't expect they were going to believe me. It's much easier to believe their father than to believe me. And he rebuilt his marriage and regained his children's trust and all of this, all based on lies about what happened. And I knew that that was going to be a difficult reality for them if they chose to actually believe it. But the thing about hard truths is that it takes a commitment to integrity, to embrace them. If the church is going to be better and do better, it's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of seeing things that we don't want to see. If we're going to be able to protect children in religious spaces, we have to stop seeing with our hearts all the time and learn how to accept difficult things. So I told him his father is actually a child molester. I told him that he had begun touching me when I was only 15 years old. I briefly detailed the nature of the threats used to keep me quiet and compliant. And then I asked him if he had any questions, and his response was, not at the moment. However, I am beginning to wonder, are you threatening him? Why wait until now to bring this all up? So I told him some about 2005, that there was a police report back then, that my story was consistent. I told him about the statute of limitations in New York State at the time. My actions now are not just for my sake, but for the sake of helping to end the systemic problem where this sort of thing keeps happening and being swept under the rug. He said he agreed that it was a problem and that it needs to stop. So I asked again if he had any questions, and he said, not right now. I offered my phone number, but he said he wasn't sure if he wanted it. So I just pled with him to understand that in my ignorance as a child, I really had believed that I was protecting him and his siblings by being quiet. And he thanked me and I left. After this, I followed up with a card. I found his address online and I sent him a note just telling him that I was praying for him and his siblings as they process. And I included my phone number so that if he did have any follow-up questions that he could call me. And it's kind of funny because that note actually wound up turning up in the discovery process in the lawsuit because he had just given it to his dad. And that's like classic for the way these things are handled. Anyone genuinely pursuing truth would jump at the opportunity to have access to both sides of a story, and people who want to maintain their delusions or illusions, they push away opportunities to hear the truth. And recognizing a hard truth about someone that you love is really earth-shattering. I'm not trying to minimize the reality of what happens when you have to face that someone that you thought you knew has been lying to you for ages or has been living a double life, that's not an easy thing to do. And I'm not trying to pretend that it is. But when you have someone, especially someone in a pastoral role, who simply refuses to see what is right in front of their face, that's problematic for the church. That's as far as I'm going to go with that. I felt really drained after I did that, but also kind of proud of myself for conquering another fear. I felt like I had this long list of things that I was afraid of, and I was just going through and checking them all off. And it was helpful to me to just start facing things head on instead of letting them be so big and scary and oppressive in my mind. So Christmas passed, and then on January 2 of 2020, the church fired Diane from her position as administrator or secretary of Hyde Park Baptist Church. According to her deposition transcript, they told her that they were eliminating her position, but not long after, she was replaced in some capacity by either one or two of Murray's daughters. I'm not claiming that the position was exactly the same. Remember that reason for firing, though, because we're going to come back around. And I also just want to highlight real quick that one of the very basic commands for the church is to care for orphans and widows. And they had a widow who'd been on staff for 21 years, doing an amazing job, and they chose to fire her. I personally believe that it was related to this lawsuit, and you'll hear more about that later, about why I think that and how rumor and evidence substantiates my belief. Okay, so we're into the new year. It's January of 2020. I am feeling very anxious about all of the things and how slowly everything is moving. There's still no answers about what's going to happen with the criminal case, if anything is ever going to come to fruition. I had been emailing some random things to the investigator, which, by the way, if you are a survivor who's considering reporting someone to the police, don't email your investigator. Just don't do it. All your emails end up as evidence. Just don't do it. You should have an attorney with you when you report. You should meet with an attorney before you go. You should understand the way that all of your words are going to be perceived. And you should not be emailing your investigator. Anyway, so on January 15, I finally decided to go through with a plan that had been nagging me for a couple of weeks. Because in 2005, after I reported to the police the second time, which we will get into later, the police department had planned to have a recorded call. They wanted to set up a recorded call between me and Jonathan Weaver so that we could get him to confess on recording, and then that would enable them to pursue charges in South Carolina. That didn't happen. I'm not going to get into why right now, but it gave me this idea that if I called him and recorded the conversation, that maybe I could give that to the investigator and it would be the thing that they need, even though he won't pick up the phone and talk to them. I had driven to Malden, South Carolina, just for some work. And as I was heading home, I just had this really strong thought, but it was really intense. What are you afraid of anyway? It's like I was screaming at myself. What are you afraid of anyway? You're being ridiculous. And just then I was coming up on a church on the left, and I pulled in the parking lot, and I had my computer with me. So I pulled it out and I opened up the voice memo app on my computer. I put my phone on speaker and I used the Google Voice app to call Jonathan Weaver and confront him. I'm going to go ahead and play that call right now.
Will you talk to me?
So I said, "Will you talk to me?" Will you talk to me? What do you think it is? He said, "Who is this?" I said, "Who do you think it is?" "Why are you calling?" he said. Because I want to have a conversation.
What did you want to have a conversation about?
You?
What about me?
So, just to be clear, at this time, he knows about the investigation in South Carolina. He knows that he's being investigated by the police. I want to know why you won't just...
You want to know why what?
I want to know why you wouldn't just tell me the truth. I wanted you to acknowledge what you did, but you won't. Huh?
I was wrong. I sinned. You want me to say?
He said, "I was wrong. I sinned. I don't know what else that you want me to say. What I did, I was wrong."
I was wrong.
Do you know how much, I don't know what the right word is, but do you know how much you could have saved me from if you had just... Do you care what you did to my life?
You lied to a lot of people's lives.
Do you care what you did to my life?
Yes, and I'm sorry for that. If you go back and change it, I would go back and change it.
What was it?
What was it?
What was it? You referring to it as it. What was it?
Sin.
So he said that he could go back and change it. He would go back and change it. That he's sorry for what he did to my life. And I said, "What is it? You keep referring to it as it." And his response was, "It was sin." He won't name it. He will not name his sin. Mm-hmm. You know, I didn't realize in 2005 that we weren't telling the same story. Why weren't we telling the same story?
I had no idea what you were telling.
So I said, "I didn't realize we weren't telling the same story. Why weren't we?" And his response to that was, "I have no idea what you were telling them." So it's obvious that it was very difficult for me at this point still to make an accusation. And his response, he knows why we weren't telling the same story. He knows he was lying. He knows he was covering his butt and leaving me to swim in the soup of everything that happened, right? And I was telling the truth, and I thought we were both telling the truth. And his response is, "I have no idea what you were telling them," suggesting that I'm the one that was telling lies. Why do I always feel like you should be absolved of all responsibility for everything that you ever did? So I asked that question because of how I was feeling in response to his answer. And he's twisting things around. I know he's twisting them. And it's still difficult for me to just call him out. And so I ask him, why is it? Why is it that I always feel like you should be absolved of all responsibility? Why do I have this need to protect you? Why do I always feel like you aren't responsible for your actions? Or you shouldn't be?
I'm responsible. I face the consequences.
I don't think you understand my point.
Why do you feel like that?
He asked me, why do I feel like that? I said, that's what I'm asking you, but I don't know if you heard that or not. He said, I faced the consequences. I am responsible for my actions. I faced the consequences. He did not face the consequences of his actions. He faced the consequences for the lie he told about what he did. He faced the consequences of adultery. He didn't face the consequences of child abuse. Ever. Not a day in his life. You always apologized and then did the same thing all over again and apologized and did the same thing and apologized and did the same thing over and over and over again. And I thought I broke you.
Yeah, I'm sorry for what I did. I did to your life. I did to my wife's life. I did to my children's life.
So this probably isn't obvious to you, but he brings his family into it to manipulate me again for the third time to drop charges against him because of how it might affect his family. And this is what he did to me all the time as a teenager. He used to tell me that he would walk out on everything, on his wife, on his family, on the church, if I didn't comply, because he couldn't do this without me, that God gave me to him to help him do his ministry, that he would just abandon all of it. He's the king, and his family members are just pawns on his chessboard.
I could go back and change it. I would go back and change it.
You said that you'd like to think you had good intentions. What could they possibly have been?
I didn't have good intentions. I was wrong and I was instead.
You said you did or you did not?
It was not. I was wrong. I was instead.
Well, the last time I talked to you, you told me that you'd like to think you had good intentions.
I didn't.
So what I'm referring to there is when I spoke to him in August. Remember I told you I reached out to him and I asked him to tell me the truth. I asked him why he held my hand on the plane on the way back from Ukraine when I was 15 years old. He held my hand with his fingers interlaced with mine under an airplane blanket for hours. And I asked him on that call in August of 2019, why did you hold my hand? And he said that he'd like to think he had good intentions. That was his response. And that didn't sit well with me. But again, I also didn't feel capable of confronting him. I felt so guilty for even suggesting that he had done something wrong. So this is kind of a follow-up from then. He told me that he'd like to think he had good intentions. And now this time he's telling me he didn't have good intentions. He was thinking selfishly. He was in sin.
Instead, I was thinking selfishly.
Why did you pick me?
No answer.
Pretty easy target.
I was in a bad frame of mind.
Why me?
But why me? I said.
What?
But why me? I know there's a reason.
I know there's a reason.
I blamed myself for a really long time, and that's not fair.
I don't think that's
He doesn't think that's fair at all.
You were good and I was bad.
What?
You were good and I was bad.
I was the one that was instead.
No, I was the one that was in sin, he said.
Do you even realize the weight of what you made me carry? Do you?
Probably understand some of it, but I don't think I understand it.
I said, I probably understand some of it, but I don't think that I understand the weight of it.
Probably not a people.
I heard a lot of people, though.
I didn't think what I can do at this point.
I don't know what I called it. Time I was kind of hoping that you would just thought that if I could to let myself let you be wrong.
I'm not letting you wrong, because I didn't feel I was wrong. Disregarding everything that was good in my life at that point, trying to wait for the Lord. I have the responsibility from you.
Did you know I went to Bob Jones to get away from you? Did you know that?
Yeah.
Did you know it at the time?
What?
Did you know it at the time?
I wasn't in the mood to hear anything at that point.
If you'd listened when I wrote you that letter in March and just let me go, I never would have had to flush a baby down a toilet.
that letter that I'm referring to here is one that I've already drawn attention to when I was discussing conversations we had about Lisa. When I said that I wrote him a letter trying to beg for my freedom, that's the letter I'm referring to right now. I'm not going to get into explaining that statement about the baby, except to say that I miscarried in June of 2005, and it was very traumatic for me.
Sorry that any of that had to happen.
Didn't have to happen.
What do you think about it?
I have no idea what he just said.
You made yourself out to be this fragile thing that would just fall apart if I did what I needed to do. I don't know what you can do, but I don't like the way I feel and I can't fix it.
Trying to really think about yourself?
I said, I don't know what you can do, but I don't like the way that I feel and I can't fix it. There actually is a word for what you did and you won't use it. Why not?
I didn't hear that. Some of the adultery.
He said, my sin is adultery.
Is that what it is?
Right?
Is that what it is? Then mine was fornication then, huh? Is that right?
I'm not looking to accuse you of anything.
It's not the point. I don't need an accusation. If you can't actually apologize for what you actually did, then you're not actually apologizing. Why didn't you pick somebody your own age?
Obviously, what I was highlighting there, when he said his sin was adultery, and I said, then mine was fornication, then huh? And he says he's not looking to accuse me of anything. He knows he can't accuse me of anything. He knows exactly what happened. But obviously, if he's going to call his sin adultery, then mine had to have been fornication. Because if all he did was cheat on his wife, I was a willing participant, I was a capable and consenting adult in that scenario, which was not true, and he knows it and I know it, and he still won't name his actual sin. I'm looking for him to use the word abuse, and he flat out refuses to do that.
I'm seriously asking, why didn't you go after somebody your own age?
I should have said, why didn't you go after an adult?
You're not gonna answer?
I know what to say.
He said sin is sin.
It's not.
That was true.
No.
He said it was true, and I said no.
I have to go now.
Well, I hope you'll think about the fact that it's important for you to name what you did. Because if you can't name it and apologize for it, then you're not apologizing, and that's not fair. Sin is not sin, and you can't just say, if one of my kids does something stupid and they have to apologize to a sibling, they're not allowed to just say, I'm sorry. They have to actually say what they're sorry for. And so far you aren't willing to do that, which tells me you're not sorry.
Sorry for stepping up committed against you. Stealing your purity, your virginity, your peace.
He said, I'm sorry for the sin that I committed against you. Still no name. For stealing your purity, your virginity, and your peace. Getting a little closer here, but he's still not using proper terminology. Stealing someone's virginity is called rape.
What was the last thing you said?
Apologize for the calamity that I brought into your life.
He apologizes for the calamity he brought into my life.
I have to have your forgiveness if I could.
And he'd like to have my forgiveness if he could.
I think you really need to go at this point.
He said he really needs to go. He has people he has to pick up.
Okay. I don't know if I'm quite there yet. Nothing. I just said that I don't know if I'm... That was a little closer, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But if you have to go, you have to go.
Sorry for the pain that you're going through, and you gotta go.
Bye.
Bye.
So I felt a lot of pressure at the end of that call to accept that nonsense as some kind of an actual apology. But I stuck to my guns because the reality is he still is refusing to name what he actually did. Anyway, I got off the call and I felt so crazy guilty. Like I had just done the most deceptive, underhanded, wrong, horrible thing that I'd ever done in my entire life. This man stole everything from me. He ruined my life. Please don't misunderstand me. I have a good life now, filled with people who care about me. This man stole so much from me, isolated me, completely changed the trajectory of my whole being. And I feel guilty for finding a way that would allow him to face consequences. For 2 out of 200 to 250 assaults on my body. That is the power of the spiritual abuse that goes along with sexual abuse, clergy abuse. I don't remember the person that this quote should be attributed to. I know Lori Ann Thompson shared it on Twitter, but she said, many survivors will spend their lifetime wiping the face of their abuser off the face of God. And I can't think of a better way to describe it. When you are manipulated into compliance and you endure sometimes years of prolonged terror, when you learn to put yourself last all the time to protect other people because you think it's the right and good thing to do. And then you go trying to seek and understand justice. What's really good? What's right? How does God really feel about what happened? Does God care? It's very difficult to navigate. And that is only compounded when church members, deacons, pastors all line up behind your abuser to take turns slamming the door in your face. So I actually almost deleted this recording. I wrestled with it for days and I finally decided, I shouldn't be taking this into my own hands. It was the wrong thing to do. I just need to delete it. Thankfully, I didn't actually do that. Instead, I called the investigator and I told her that I did something that maybe I shouldn't have done. This felt like some kind of a confession to me. I just need to call her and confess that I did this thing that I probably shouldn't have done. She said, "Did you record this conversation?" And I said, "Is that illegal?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, then yes, I recorded it." So she scheduled an appointment for me to come into the police station and play the call for her. And the prosecutor was going to decide if they could use it in place of his in-person statement, which ultimately the answer to that was yes. And they were able to ask the judge for warrants. Pretty sure it was February 6th. Let me check. Yeah, it was February 6th. It says, "So I heard back from the investigator a few hours ago. She said the judge signed 2 warrants, 1 count of assault and battery first for each of the 2 days in 2001. As expected, South Carolina won't extradite on these charges. I found out, I think, on the 11th, maybe the 10th, that there's a thing called an extradition exception, where the arresting officer or the investigator can fill out a form and ask the judge to break the rules because they believe that a person is a threat. So I called the investigator and asked her if this was something that we could try, and she told me that she actually just filled out and submitted the extradition exception to the judge, and it was approved. So we found out on the 11th of February of 2020 that the thing that I did not think was ever going to happen was actually going to happen. The Pennsylvania police were supposed to go and arrest him. And the original plan was that he was supposed to be held in jail for 30 to 90 days, and someone from South Carolina would have to go up and get him from the Pennsylvania jail and bring him to Greenville, where he would be processed and his bond would be decided and all of that. He was actually arrested on the 18th, and he was out by the night of the 19th because they released him and gave him 48 hours to turn himself in Greenville by himself, or he would be rearrested. He turned himself in and has bond hearing within 2 hours. They hired Lucas Marchant here in Greenville as his defense attorney, who, if you're from this area, you know that he ran for solicitor. He used to work in the solicitor's office. They hired him. He had his bond hearing within 2 hours, and his bond was set at $50,000 personal cognizance bond. So he just had to post $5,000, and he was out within 4 hours. I don't know, he spent a total of maybe 24 hours in jail, and that's all the time he would ever spend. But it was something. Rachel dropped everything to go with me because Pat was in Myrtle Beach for business, and Lisa shot me some looks. The judge asked me if I had anything I wanted to say, and I said no, but when he asked me that, she turned to face me because she was sitting in the row ahead of me, and she made a nasty face at me. I do wish that I had been told that I would have the opportunity to speak because I would have had something prepared. Anyway, he has Parkinson's disease. So he's standing on the other side of the 2 panes of glass. He's shackled, and at one point, while the judge was trying to decide what was going to happen, he lifted up his hands so they would start to shake and make that really obvious. And it just highlighted the fact that, or how, his vulnerabilities protected him in this whole situation. And you just contrast that with the fact that it was my vulnerabilities that he exploited to harm me. Looking at his hands shaking, I remembered a time after one of the assaults that he was actually arrested for. He held my hands, palms up, kind of cupped open beside each other in his hands. He was sitting across from me on the other bed in the hotel. And he held my hands like that, and he said, "In your hands, you hold my entire life." And I didn't know what he meant then, but it came back to me sitting there in that room and watching his hands shake. Obviously, he meant that I had the power to destroy him because I knew the truth about who he was. Anyway, so that was the start of a very long, drawn-out process. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, we'll see you next time.
If your community is dedicated to fostering a safe and supportive environment, connect with Grace, Godly Response to Abuse in the Christian Environment, at netgrace.org. Grace's mission is to empower Christian communities to recognize, prevent, and respond to abuse effectively. They provide vital resources and training to help churches understand the complexities of abuse and adopt effective prevention policy and trauma-informed responses.